So, welcome everyone. Now, as you can imagine from that introduction, I get asked a number of questions pretty often. What are you doing here? What do you do here? Is there something wrong with you? All these questions. And, I've got my canned answers, my little jokes. I'll say that, I'll say I'm a D-list Bulgarian celebrity. That's what I do. I'll have to vehemently deny that I work for the CIA. I really don't, but people don't believe me. But when I say, okay, I work for this company, I'm a D-list celebrity because of my podcast or whatever, there's a little grain of truth there. And it's not the celebrity part, it's the weirdness part, the kind of improbable part. Because if there's one thing I can say about my life here in Bulgaria is that it has been tremendously improbable. And why is that special? Why is that interesting? And what does that mean for you? Well, you could imagine when I think back to when I was your age, when I was in high school, just starting university, I was not imagining the life that I have now. I did not imagine I would live in Bulgaria, that I would work with startups or have a podcast or any of this stuff. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't imagine a very happy life. When I was in high school, starting university, I honestly didn't really think I'd be happy. It was a hard time for me, and shortly after I started university, I faced a lot of family tragedies. My father committed suicide, and he wasn't the first in my family to do so. And as I looked at all these things, I really thought that, well, that's my life. I can't escape genetics. I can't escape family. I don't have a choice. And yeah, I was suffering from depression, but there was something else I was suffering from that was maybe even more crippling at the moment. It was a lack of imagination. When I say imagination, what do I mean? I'm not talking about the ability to, tell a good story or to draw something off the top of your head. I'm talking about the ability to imagine your own future, to imagine the kind of lives that you could live, the kind of things that you could do. Because what was so crippling, what was so difficult about that time was just that I couldn't imagine a different life for myself. Certainly not the one that I have now. And at the time, I was also doing what I'm sure a lot of you are starting to do, thinking about a career. What am I going to do with my life? I wanted to be a history professor. Lucky for me, that is a career path that doesn't necessarily require a lot of imagination, right? You do your bachelor's, you do your master's, you do your PhD, you get a job at a university. So that's what I did. I checked the boxes. I got all those degrees. I wrote about Alexander Stambuliski for 2 years because, why not? And at the end of those years, I just finished up a Fulbright research grant right here in Sofia. I had an offer to do a PhD at a good school, but there's a bit of a problem. First, the university was like, yeah, we don't have a lot of money to pay you or anything, and also we're in London. It's kind of expensive. But there was another problem. I read maybe one too many articles about how hard it is to be a professor these days, about adjuncts and pay things, and all this added up to, what? I said, maybe this isn't what I want to do. And so just like that, 5 years, I had been going down the same path, and like that wasn't what I was going to do anymore. And I was terrified. Or at least that's probably what you'd expect me to say. Actually, I wasn't. It felt great. It felt amazing. I was the happiest I'd been in years, just at that moment when I was giving up on the biggest dream I'd ever had. So, why? Well, because just at that moment, my thought wasn't, oh my God, I failed, oh, I didn't do it, My thought was, wait a minute. So, if I'm not going to go down this path, well, that means I could do pretty much anything. I could do lots of stuff. And I can take the time to figure out what kind of stuff I want to do. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but it's really easy to go your entire life and never think that way. And so, what was I experiencing? I was experiencing imagination. Maybe for the first time, I was imagining all the different things that I could do. Thought, well, I could live in, Thailand. I could live right here in Bulgaria. I could still try to be a professor, but I could also be a business consultant. I could be a voiceover artist. I could be a high school teacher. And suddenly realizing that I could actually just take the time and figure all these things out was the most liberating thing I had ever experienced in my life. But maybe some of you are thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but how really easy is it really to kind of explore all these things? You need education, you need skills. So that's the kind of second point I want to make, because a core part of what allowed me to feel that way and allowed me to be flexible like that was that in my education, I hadn't just studied, early 20th century radical agrarian movements in the Balkans and their connection to nationalism. I had studied how to give a speech. I'd studied how to write an essay. I'd studied how to do research. I'd studied how to think like a scientist, to think like an artist. I'd gotten a solid liberal arts education that taught me lots of what I think of as kind of core skills. And so the reason I could feel this way, the reason I could feel excited about all the careers, all the things I could try, was that I knew that there were lots of jobs that I could do, that I had these core skills that I could apply to doing lots of things. And that's something I wanted to explain to you all as you're thinking about your education, your careers, what you're going to do, that it can be so frightening to think, well, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to get that education, but what if it doesn't work out? Then I won't have any education, I won't be prepared for the job market. What's going to happen? My parents will be very mad. But really, if you kind of think about your education this way, if you make sure you learn a bunch of kind of core skills that you can apply to lots of different jobs, then you're going to be fine. In fact, you're going to be probably a lot more excited about trying different things than someone who just got that one degree that you can do one single thing with. And so, to maybe help you visualize this, let me give you some examples of some things that I did once I kind of opened my mind to this, imagining what I could do and trying lots of different jobs and careers and seeing what was interesting. So the podcast, you heard it mentioned. When I decided not to do the PhD, I still loved Bulgarian history and I wanted to engage with it. So I said, okay, why not create this history podcast? So I created it. And as I recorded, I got pretty good at that. So I started doing little side gigs doing voice acting. Voiceovers for a documentary or a commercial or something. And as I did that, I started to get to know the people working in these companies. And I started helping them write scripts, helping them build some of the ideas of whatever projects they were creating. Then one day, a friend of mine who works in one of these, Stani, he says, hey, my company and I, we want to enter this documentary film contest in the US to make a 5-minute environmental documentary. You want to join? Sure, that sounds cool. So that's what we did. I wrote a screenplay called The Bulgarian Solution to Climate Change. We made the film, and we swept the awards. We won like half the awards in this category at the film festival. And suddenly I was looking and saying, wait, how did I end up writing an award-winning screenplay? Like, who's that guy? That's not me. I never did that kind of stuff. But I got there because I was open to trying these new things, to developing these skills, and to always looking out for new ways to apply them. And I ended up doing stuff that was so meaningful and felt amazing and interesting. One more quick example. I also do a lot of writing because I learned how to write in university. A friend of mine was working on this really cool project called the Africa Prize for Engineering. It's funded by the UK government, where they go and they teach a bunch of African entrepreneurs how to kind of start businesses. And so he had this idea to take me and a few other people along for the ride. And so we went to Nairobi, Kenya, and we interviewed 30 or 40 entrepreneurs from all over Africa and got their stories and how they succeeded and how they failed. We transcribed all of them, and we wrote almost 100 practical lessons about how to start a business in Africa based on the experiences of Africans who started businesses in Africa. And I got to work on this in Kenya for a month. It was amazing. I mean, who would have thought that, living in Bulgaria would have brought me there and that I could work on something so impactful and so interesting. I mean, I still occasionally get emails from someone who's explaining that, hey, I've got this kind of a yucca farm in Tanzania and I have this business problem. Do you have any ideas? And I'll go into all the lessons we wrote and say, yeah, I think this one, and this one might help you out. and thinking like, I'm helping a farmer in Tanzania right now. Like, that's super weird. But again, it was imagination. It was making those connections, meeting people and looking for cool things to work on and always being open to try something new that got me there. So when I kind of think about all this together, and I think back on where I was when I was graduating high school, how much pain I was in, how hard life was, and my complete inability to imagine anything approaching the kind of satisfaction and happiness and fulfillment that I have today. And thinking about that, I wanted you guys to imagine this, that you may think you have some idea of what your life is going to be right now, but you don't. You have no idea. I think for nearly everyone out there, life is just the most improbable thing. And that if you can kind of accept that, and if you can embrace this idea that you should be imaginative and you should think big thoughts and wide thoughts about what kind of life you could have, then, I don't know, you'd be amazed at what you can overcome. So, in conclusion, I want you all to sometime, maybe not today, but maybe before you start going off to university or whatever you're going to do after school, to try that experiment. To try taking a moment to think completely openly about what your life might be, and then to stick with that. And to always be open to trying new things and learning new things and seeing where they're going to take you, because I guarantee you it's going to be somewhere amazing. All right. Thank you all so very much.